A mail-order bride rolled off the train in a wheelchair. The single-dad rancher who'd sent for her took one look and did something no one in town expected. Montana Territory, spring of 1879. The air smelled like fresh-cut pine and hot iron. A thin band of coal smoke drifted across a pale morning sky as the westbound train screeched into Hollow Creek Station. Snow-tipped mountains stood far off like watchmen, and beyond them stretched a country still too wild for promises, but not too wild for hope. Jesse Holt waited on the platform in weathered boots, one big hand resting on each of his twins. Matthew and Maisie, both barely 8. His wide, hat-shaded eyes that had seen too much, wore dry years, and the kind of loss that turns a man quiet. Today, for the first time in a long while, uncertainty sat there too. He checked the crumpled letter in his vest pocket again. Clara Dorsey, 27, Savannah. Brown hair. No family. Willing to live on a ranch. Not a word about. The conductor hopped down. A porter with thick arms followed, rolling someone along the ramp. A hush went over the small crowd. The woman in the chair carried herself with steady calm. Chestnut hair twisted simply at the nape, blue-gray, eyes clear as open prairie. A plain travel coat, gloves, and a heavy, worn book resting across her lap. Her slim hands were still. Not a tremor. Jesse's jaw tightened. He took a step, stopped, and took off his hat. She found his face right away. "You must be Mr. Holt," she said. Her voice was soft but sure. "I'm Clara Dorsey." He nodded. "Ma'am." No one moved. The silence felt like glass. "Papa, is that her?" Matthew tugged Jesse's coat. Maisie didn't wait. She wriggled free and ran right up to the wheels, all fearless curiosity. She stopped short and peered up. "Why are you sitting like that?" "Maisie," Jesse warned. The woman laughed quietly. "Because I ride a different kind of horse," she said, patting the armrest. "Mine doesn't eat hay, but he sure rattles the rails." Matthew edged closer. "Is it fast?" "Depends who's pushing," she said with a wink. A few stiff faces eased. Someone chuckled. Even the old telegraph man leaned out to listen. "Do you like stories?" she asked the twins. Both nodded hard. "Well then," she said, lifting the thick book, "how about this? Once upon a time, in the land of red dust and golden sunsets, there lived a cowboy and a dinosaur." "A dinosaur?" Maisie squealed. "Oh yes," she nodded. "A grumpy one. He wore a hat too small for his head and boots too big for his claws. Do you know what he wanted most?" "What?" Both breathed. "A friend who wouldn't run away when he roared." The crowd's unease softened another notch. Jesse tried not to smile. His mouth still twitched. Her eyes found his for a heartbeat. There was no begging there, no fear. Only a quiet strength that rattled him more than tears would have. He stepped forward, picked up her small valise, and tipped his head toward the wagon near the post office. "I'll take that." She blinked once and nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Holt. Can I push her?" Maisie bounced, hands already on the chair. Jesse hesitated. "It's all right," the woman said, looking up at him. "She can learn. We all can." They moved toward the wagon. Jesse's fingers pressed the letter in his pocket again. He had expected many things from a mail-order bride. Not this. And not her. She came to the Holt Ranch under a simple deal. Trial weeks before any vows. Jesse called it plain sense. The town called it scandal. Hollow Creek carried news like the wind, and the wind liked to talk. Women at the general store, men at card tables in the saloon, every tongue wagged. Brought a lady in a buggy to a working ranch. Did he? Reckon he wants a wife or a boarder to feed? She fooled him sure. Bet those letters were written from a sickbed. Jesse heard it all, sharp pity, cheap jokes, sometimes tossed loud enough for the children to catch. He answered none of it. He saddled earlier each morning, came home late, dust in his beard and silence in his mouth. Supper turned heavy. The smell of beans and boiled potatoes clung to the room. Jesse ate slow, eyes on his plate. The woman, Clara, sat straight in her chair, napkin across her lap, answering the twins' chatter with patient warmth. One evening, Maisie yelped soft. Clara set down her fork and rolled closer. With careful fingers, she plucked a splinter from the girl's tiny hand and pressed a kiss there. Jesse paused mid-bite. He looked up, really looked, and saw not a broken woman, but a woman who mended what hurt without being asked. That night, he sat on the porch until the lantern ran low. He could still hear her soft laugh with the twins. Something in him turned, strange and unsteady. Inside, Clara wrote. The journal caught what she couldn't say out loud. It took in Jesse's averted eyes, the town's small cruelties, the shame of using her sister's name, of hiding what couldn't be hidden. Still, her pen whispered, I do not blame Jesse. He never asked for this. He doesn't know how rare it is to hold his tongue when others don't. That alone is kindness. Late one afternoon, she forgot the journal on the edge of the kitchen table, beside folded shirts and a half-eaten biscuit. Jesse came in, sweat darkening his shirt. He reached for a cloth. His hand brushed the leather cover. He hesitated, not nosy, just tired and needing a way to cross the quiet between them. He opened to a page. I know he regrets. I see it in his shoulders, how they carry more than cattle. I am not what he expected. I am what no one expects. But the children laugh when I read, and that is more than I thought I'd find here. His grip hardened. Another page. I used her name because mine felt poisoned. Clara's name meant youth and bright rooms. Mine meant pity and a heavy past. I could not bear to be less than a woman. A soft breath behind him. He turned. Clara sat in the hall, eyes wide. Jesse closed the book gently. It was on the table. I didn't mean you read it, she said. Her voice shook, then steadied. How much? Just a few lines. He stood there, caught and not running. I didn't know you felt that way, he said. I didn't know any of it. It's all right. She swallowed. I don't blame you. Paper listens better than people sometimes. He didn't step back. You were honest there, he said quietly. I've been a coward. I kept my distance because I thought silence would be easier than kindness. Maybe the only thing worth the trouble out here is kindness. For the first time in days, she smiled a little. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was failing at everything. Not all the way. Wind rattled the barn roof. Inside, something gentled. Next morning brought hooves and wagon wheels. The mail carrier handed Jesse a small bundle, soap, flour, and one letter in neat cursive. He paused. Eliza Dorsey. From Clara Dorsey. He stared at it on the porch, then went inside, steps heavy. The woman, whoever she really was, sat by the window with mending in her lap. Her hand stopped when she saw the envelope. Jesse said nothing, just held it out. She looked from the seal to his face. My name is Eliza, she said softly. Clara is my younger sister. Jesse didn't sit. He waited. She drew a breath. My father was Judge Dorsey. He sent more men to the rope than anyone down south. He made enemies. They came one day while we were alone. She gripped the chair arms. Her voice stayed calm, but he saw her throat tighten. I pushed Clara behind me. One of them grabbed me. I fell from the second-story balcony. My back broke. Her chin lifted. I lost more than my legs. I lost my place. I turned into someone folks want to pity. Jesse's eyes didn't flinch. Clara married and told me to use her name when I wrote. Eliza went on. She said it might be my only chance. I didn't want to fool you. I wanted someone to meet me before they met the chair. She pressed the letter to her chest. I didn't come to trap you. I came to prove I'm still a woman, that I can give, that I deserve to love and be loved. He didn't speak. She thought he might walk out. Instead, he stepped closer and knelt to meet her eyes. "I'm not angry you lied," he said. "I'm angry you thought you weren't worth the truth. From now on, live with your own name." Her fingers tightened around the paper. She didn't look away. He put his hand on hers. Not pushing, just there. Warmth that said, "I see you." The quiet changed shape. Not a wall anymore. A bridge. That night the house calmed early, the children worn out from catching fireflies. Jesse knocked, then entered with a tray, 1 cup of chamomile, steam curling. "I made this," he said. "Well tried." "You made tea?" Eliza lifted a brow. "I did," he said. "No one died." She smiled and took the cup. He stood at the window, arms folded. "My wife was sick a long time," he said. Strong, stubborn. Nothing stopped what was coming. She passed before I said what I should have. Eliza listened. "I told myself I'd never love again," he went on. "Safer that way." He turned, eyes shadowed but clear. "But then I watched you hold my girl's hand and read like their hearts mattered. And I thought, maybe some things are worth the trouble. Maybe we're both broken," she said, looking into her tea. "Two splinters in the same world. Broken pieces still build fences," he said. "And houses." She looked up, smiling small. "Thank you for calling me by my name." He nodded. "Good night, Eliza." "Good night, Jesse." For the first time since she'd come west, she felt something that wasn't just survival. It felt like a beginning. Before dawn, Eliza was already moving. The house was quiet except for wind in the shutters. She wheeled gently over the old boards. By the time Jesse came in from the barn, the children sat at the table, little hands wrestling with bootlaces under Eliza's eye. "You cross it like a tiny log bridge," she said, showing Matthew's laces. "Then the bunny dives under. Like that." Matthew frowned. "Why does the bunny go under?" "To find the carrot," she said with a grin. Jesse paused in the doorway, taking it in, the twins laughing, drawn to her like sunflowers to light. Flour dusted her sleeve, a smudge marked her cheek, a ribbon hung from her pocket. Later on the porch, Eliza brushed Maisie's hair, tying it with a faded sky-blue ribbon. "This was my mother's," she said, fingers nimble even with a slight tremble. "She braided my hair every Sunday." "Did she make you pretty?" Maisie asked. "She made me feel pretty," Eliza said. Jesse, on his way to fetch tools, stopped. He hadn't realized how seldom laughter had visited this house until now. One afternoon, while the sun laid gold over the field, Matthew tripped on a stone and cried out. Eliza pushed hard, fast arms straining. She reached him before the ground did, pulling him close. He was fine. She wasn't. The chair tipped. With nothing to catch herself, she went down, curling instinctively around the boy. Jesse ran from the stable. He found her in the dust, skirt torn, face smudged. Matthew tucked safe in her arms. "You all right?" he asked, dropping to his knee. "I've had smoother moments," she said, out of breath, but laughing. He slid his arms under her and lifted. She felt light and solid at the same time. She smelled like lavender and dry earth. As he carried her toward the porch, her cheeks flushed. "I thought I could be a hero today," she said. "You are," he answered, voice rough and warm. "You just forgot your cape." Their eyes met. Not pity. Not awkward. Something quieter and true. That evening Jesse lingered over supper. He watched her pass the potatoes. He listened to her voice while she read the twins to sleep. He wondered how someone who could no longer walk filled every room with such life. The next day turned still and dry. The twins played near the old grain shed. Eliza rested under a cottonwood, journal open in her lap. A faint hiss, like air leaking, reached her. It sharpened. She looked toward the shed. A rattler coiled low in the grass. Maisie stood a few feet away, back turned, singing to herself as she picked flowers. Eliza's heart slammed. "Maisie," she called, but the girl didn't hear. Eliza scanned the ground. No rock. No stick. Only her journal and the glass inkwell. She grabbed the inkwell and hurled it. The bottle flew and cracked hard against the snake's head. Maisie shrieked and stumbled back. Jesse bolted from the barn. When he reached them, Eliza was already wheeling fast, pale, hands shaking. Maisie ran straight into her lap, sobbing. "I heard it," the girl cried. "It was right there." "I know, honey," Eliza whispered, holding her close. Jesse froze, staring at the broken glass, the dead snake, the woman who had not hesitated. "Mama Eliza." Maisie sobbed. "Mama Eliza." Jesse's breath caught. He didn't speak. Words were too small for the moment. Hollow Creek liked order, Sunday sermons, cattle sales, and gossip faster than spring runoff. Eliza's presence on the whole place stirred more than curiosity. It stirred discomfort. At the store, women whispered by the flour sacks. On the chapel steps, men in dusty boots traded frowns. "She's crippled," one muttered. "Mail-order bride, my eye." She tricked him. Poor Jesse. A man like him could have married up. A whole woman. Should have picked that nurse girl, Linda May's daughter. Sweet thing. Strong legs. Before long, someone called a meeting, just a gathering, in the old schoolhouse by the well. Jesse was invited. Then expected. Then pushed. He went. The room smelled of chalk and pine. About 30 townsfolk filled the benches, storekeepers, ranch hands, wives, and Pastor Clayton up front like a judge waiting on a case. Jesse stood by the door, arms folded, face unreadable. Mayor Hawthorne cleared his throat. "Now, Jesse, folks are concerned about your situation," a tight-mouthed woman said. "You've got 2 children and land to work. And that woman, her name is Eliza." Jesse cut in. A man stood. "You're a good man, Jesse. It's not too late. Linda May's girl is still unattached. That one's a healer. Eliza's, well, she's what?" Jesse's voice filled the room. He stepped forward, boots loud on the old floor. "A woman who can't walk? A woman who reads to my children every night? Who taught my boy to tie his boots? Who threw a glass bottle at a rattlesnake to save my girl? Silence. You want me to send her away because she doesn't fit your picture?" His voice hardened. "Then you don't know what strength looks like." No one answered. He looked around once more, turned, and walked out. That same afternoon, Eliza waited in the wagon outside the mercantile, not knowing about the meeting. Jesse came toward her, not with anger, but with fire. He climbed up, lifted her carefully into his arms, and stepped down. "Jesse, trust me." He carried her straight down Main Street, past the blacksmith, past the saloon, past porches where whispers usually lived, right into the square by the pump where old men liked to play cards. Heads turned. Children stopped. Talk died away. He set her on a bench by the well. Then he faced the growing circle and raised his voice. "If anyone still thinks she doesn't belong here, come say it to her face." A murmur ran through the people. No one moved. Eyes dropped. Feet shuffled. Even the preacher, who had baptized Jesse's children, stayed quiet. "She has more heart than half the men in this town," Jesse said. "You heard what she's lived through. You saw what she did. And you still question her worth." Still no one spoke. From behind the crowd, a small voice piped up, Maisie, gripping Matthew's hand. "She's our mama now." The tension thinned. Someone coughed. Another nodded. It wasn't applause. It was something simpler, harder to earn. Acceptance, slow and real. Eliza sat very still, hands folded, chin high. Only her eyes gave her away, bright and wet. Jesse leaned close. "They needed to see," he whispered. "What you already knew," she said. "What's that?" "That I belong. That we all do, if we're brave enough to stay." The sky that evening was the color of a bruise. heavy and waiting. A storm hadn't broken yet, but something else had shifted. A stranger rode into town with a limp and a crooked jaw. He tied his mule at the saloon, dusted his coat, and ordered whiskey like he owned the place. No one knew him. No one welcomed him. But when he saw Eliza roll past the storehouse later, the glass in his hand cracked. Jesse spotted him and felt the air change, the strange, still kind of quiet, that comes before lightning. After supper, 3 slow knocks hit the door. Jesse opened it, hand near his holster. "Name's Cutter," the man drawled. "I'm looking for a Dorsey." "No one here by that name," Jesse said. "Funny," Cutter answered, eyes sliding toward the lamplight in the parlor. "I saw a woman today looks just like the judge's girl. That judge hung my brother 15 years ago." "You're wrong," Jesse said, stepping forward. "Am I?" Cutter grinned. "Maybe. Think I'll stick around. Ask a few more questions." Jesse shut the door hard. Eliza had wheeled in behind him, pale as paper. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows who I am." Jesse didn't waste breath. He woke the twins and turned it into a game, a midnight adventure. Eliza packed quick, hands shaking as she tucked food and water into a basket. They slipped out the back. To the stable. The night felt thick. Every step sounded loud. Inside the old barn, Jesse lit one lantern and led them to the far stall, empty and half-boarded. It smelled like hay and cold dirt. "You stay here," he said. "No matter what, stay quiet." "You can't face him alone," Eliza said, grabbing his arm. "I won't let him come near you, or them." Her fingers tightened. "If I die tonight, promise me something." "Don't say that." "Promise," she insisted, voice breaking. "Promise you'll never let the children know I was afraid." He looked at her, really looked, and saw the girl she'd been before the fall, before the chair, before the world turned cruel. "I promise." He kissed her forehead and left. Outside, wind picked up. Cutter was already near the fence, lantern swinging in one hand, gun in the other. Jesse stepped from the shadows. "You looking for me?" he called. Cutter turned, eyes hard. "Well, you're braver than I figured." Jesse didn't answer. He backed toward the trees. Cutter followed. What came next wasn't a showdown with 10 paces and clean shots. It was a chase through black timber, brutal and breathless. Branches tore at clothes. Roots grabbed ankles. Jesse led him deeper toward the gulch east of the creek. There he ducked behind a boulder. A shot cracked the night. Then silence. Hours later, Jesse stumbled back. His shirt was ripped. Blood soaked his shoulder. His steps wavered, but his eyes were steady. Eliza gasped as he dropped beside the lantern's glow. "You're hurt." "He's gone," Jesse panted. "He won't be back." She pressed a cloth to the wound, tears falling. "You could have died." "So could you," he said, smiling weary. She bent her forehead to his. "But we didn't." Rain started then, drumming the roof steady as a heartbeat. The storm rolled in and stayed, as if the sky refused sleep. Jesse lay feverish, face pale, breath rough. He refused to call the town doctor, asked too many questions. The shoulder bled slow. Sweat beaded his brow. Eliza never left his side. From a leather pouch she brewed herbs, crushed leaves, boiled water, cooled his skin with clean cloths, and changed the dressing with calm hands, the kind that learned to bear pain by caring for others. The twins peeked in, eyes big. Eliza smiled. "Papa's resting," she whispered. "Keep your toys quiet. Pretend we're in a library." Matthew nodded. Maisie tiptoed away with her stuffed rabbit. Midnight brought wind and thunder. Jesse stirred, breathing ragged. Eliza took his hand. "Jesse," she whispered. His eyes opened, unfocused. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk your life for someone who can't even walk beside you?" "You can't walk," he said, voice hoarse and low. "But you're the only one who ever made my heart move." She blinked. stunned. He lifted her hand to his chest. Beneath the bruises, she felt the steady beat. "I don't need your legs," he whispered. "I just need you." She leaned in. Their lips met, soft first, then sure. Not a blazing kiss, but one made of truth. It carried all the words they hadn't said and all the weight they had carried. When they parted, they only looked at each other. Two broken things done, pretending to be whole. Morning came bright. Sunlight poured across the quilt. Jessie slept easy, color returning. Eliza wheeled to the kitchen, hands still shaking from the night, and set water to boil. A knock startled her. She opened the door. Matthew and Maisie stood there holding a bundle wrapped in a flour sack. "We made this," Matthew said, shy. Inside was a scrap of cloth, muddy and blotched with watercolor. In crooked letters it read, "Mama, Eliza, thank you for saving Daddy." Eliza stared, speechless. Maisie hugged her leg. "We want you to stay, forever." Tears slid down Eliza's face. She didn't wipe them away. For the first time, she didn't feel like a guest, or a burden, or a woman pretending. She felt home. The air the next day smelled like wildflowers and warm bread. The sky was clear, the breeze easy. It felt like a promise, kind of morning. After the storm, both the one in the clouds and the one in people's hearts, the town went quiet. If anyone still had unkind words, they kept them to themselves. So when Jesse Holt said he was marrying Eliza, not the mail-order bride, not the woman in the chair, but Eliza Dorsey, no one argued. There were only slow nods and calmer faces, the kind that said, "We understand." They chose a small clearing at the edge of the ranch where the grass leaned soft and wildflowers grew in sleepy rows. An arch of old barnwood stood there, woven with green vines. A patchwork quilt lay underfoot, sewn by hands that had once doubted and now sent silent blessings in every stitch. Eliza wore a simple white dress the pastor's wife had made. Her hair was braided neat and pinned with tiny sprigs of baby's breath. In her lap she held a bouquet, dandelions and daisies, with 2 red poppies cut that morning by Matthew and Maisie. Jesse stood by her in his best shirt, clean, though his boots still carried the dust of his land. He hardly looked away from her face. Guests wandered in slow, a few at first, the pastor, the storekeeper, a shy widow balancing a fresh pie. Then more neighbors, some who had whispered before, came carrying casseroles and soft eyes. There were no speeches, no big show, just people choosing to stand near. The pastor cleared his throat. "We're gathered," he said, "not to honor perfect lives, but the courage to choose love, even when it wears scars, even when it walks a different road, or rolls up to the altar with steady hands." Eliza smiled, steady and bright. Jesse reached for her fingers and held them. The pastor read a short verse. His voice faded into a hush. "If anyone has reason to object," he said, "speak now or keep the peace." Silence followed, not tight and cold, but full and warm, like a blanket spread out. Jesse bent slowly in front of Eliza and lifted one of her feet in his hands, the foot that felt nothing, the one she had cried over when no one saw. He pressed a gentle kiss to the top, then looked up and spoke clear enough for the back rows to hear. "These are the strongest legs I've ever known." Eliza's hands trembled. No words came. Only tears, true, bright, healing tears. The vows were plain and good. No long poems. No fancy promises. Just 2 people choosing one another in the open. When the pastor finished, there wasn't a roar of clapping. Only a quiet yes in the faces around them, the kind that sinks deep. Then Jesse leaned down, slid his arms under Eliza, and lifted her. He carried her into the tall grass beyond the arch. Under the huge Montana sky, he turned with her in a slow circle. It wasn't smooth. His boot caught. Her bouquet slipped. They laughed out loud, big, happy laughter that felt like sunlight. The twins danced rings around them, clapping and whooping. They didn't look like broken souls in that meadow. They looked like two people made whole because they chose each other, again and again. Word spread, not with sharp tongues this time, but like a warm wind crossing fences. The blacksmith's hammer beat an easier rhythm. The grocer packed sugar with a grin. Even the preacher's wife hummed while scraping her pie dish. Folks didn't pretend Eliza wasn't in a chair. They just stopped making the chair the only thing they saw. Life on the ranch found its pace. Eliza learned the sounds of place, the pump handle squeak, the hinge that complained on the back door, the way the barn roof ticked at noon. She kept a neat list by the kitchen window. Laundry on Mondays, bread on Wednesdays, lessons with the twins every afternoon. Her notes were tidy and firm. Practice sums, copy phrases, ask Matthew about the river. Remind Maisie to check the chicken eggs. Read at dusk. She added new lines as days passed. Mend Matthew's shirt, steep chamomile for Jessie's shoulder, save string for Bean's trellis. Jessie fixed a ramp on the porch and sanded the splinters off the rail. He planted 2 saplings beside the steps, one for each of the children to water. He also moved a blue chair by the front window, because Eliza liked that light for reading. He didn't say these changes out loud. He just did them, and that said everything. Evenings settled into a rhythm. After supper, Eliza read while the twins leaned against her, their eyelids growing heavy. Jessie listened from a table, hands wrapped around a mug he didn't really need. Sometimes she told a whole story. Sometimes she stopped halfway and made the twins guess the ending. Their answers were wild and sweet, and she tucked each one away like tiny treasures. On Sunday afternoons, they sometimes rolled to the creek. Jessie pushed slow over the bumps. The twins ran ahead and threw sticks for the water to carry. Eliza would lay her palm on the rough arm of the chair and watch the current moving. Everything flows, she'd tell the children. Even hard days. Especially hard days. They nodded like they understood, and maybe they did. When fall's first chill came, Maisie caught a cold. It wasn't serious, but it pinched her voice and made her eyes watery. Eliza sang to her in a low voice while applying warm cloths and honey tea. Jessie watched from the doorway, feeling that old fear rise, the fear of illness taking someone he loved. Eliza met his eyes and shook her head a little, calming him without a word. The next morning, Maisie asked for porridge and asked for 2 spoons, just to be fancy. The fear passed. The town changed in small ways. People who had once looked through Eliza now looked at her. Mrs. Calhoun from the store saved her the last jar of apricot preserves. The widowed man from the North Line stopped by with fence posts and left with a book for his boy after Eliza said he should read more than sale notices. Pastor Clayton's wife began sending recipes on folded scraps of paper. Apple pandowdy, good for cold nights. Eliza tried each one and penciled notes in the margin. Less sugar, more nutmeg. Works with dried pears. On a late afternoon near harvest, the twins and Eliza sat stringing beans under the cottonwood while Jessie repaired a gate. A dusty rider paused on the road and tipped his hat. "Afternoon," he said, eyes on Eliza's hands working the line. She nodded back. "Afternoon." He rode on with no extra stare. It was a small thing, but it felt like the whole town had shifted an inch toward right. Sometimes Eliza still rode at night, when the house was quiet. Her journal knew the true shape of her days, the ache in her shoulders, the fear that flickered when thunder rolled, the secret joy of hearing Mama Eliza down the hall. She wrote about Jessie's steady ways, how he counted the children's breaths when they were sick, how he always filled the wood box before rain, how he looked at her like she was not a problem to solve, but a person to know. Jessie, for his part, didn't write much. He fixed things. He mended tack, repaired a loose floorboard so Eliza's wheel wouldn't catch, moved the heavy pot to a lower shelf. But one night he took a scrap of brown paper and wrote a few lines, slow and careful. He tucked it in the journal when she wasn't looking. She found it later. I don't need a house full of perfect. I need a house full of you. G. She pressed the paper to her chest and breathed in. That breath felt like a prayer. Winter teased the edges of the hills with early frost. On the first real cold day, Jesse came in with red knuckles and a grin. "Snow tonight," he said. The twins cheered. Eliza lit extra candles, and they watched flakes drift like feathers through the lamplight. They built a small snowman by the porch the next morning. Matthew rolled, Maisie patted, Jesse lifted. Eliza tied the faded blue ribbon from her pocket around the snowman's neck. "Every gentleman needs a scarf," she said. The twins decided the snowman's name should be Mr. Button, even though he had no buttons at all. That evening, the four of them made a stew so thick the spoon stood up. Eliza told a story about the grumpy dinosaur again, this time giving him a soft side and a friend who loved him for his roar. Matthew declared the dinosaur should take up ranch work. Maisie said he should wear the blue ribbon. Jesse laughed until his eyes shone. "Maybe he should," he said. "Maybe he should wear it on Sundays." The ranch still brought hard days. A fence line fell in a windstorm, and Jesse stayed out late setting posts by lantern light. A cow calved early and needed more help than one man usually had. Eliza didn't ride out, but she was there, boiling water, laying out clean cloths, keeping the children busy when worry would have run wild. When Jesse came in bone-tired, she had warm broth ready and a quiet place at the table. He didn't have to ask. She didn't have to explain. That is what family began to feel like. In town, the schoolhouse hosted a harvest supper. Long boards were set on sawhorses. Blankets stood in for tablecloths. Pies came in steaming. Eliza wasn't sure she should go. The last time she'd been in that building, people had questioned her right to stay. Jesse asked, "Do you want to?" She lifted her chin. Yes. They went together. Heads turned when they entered. This time the looks were different, more like welcome than weighing. Mrs. Calhoun waved them over. "Sit here," she said, sliding plates down the bench. "I saved you the peach cobbler." The twins ran to the other children, who pulled them into a game with no hesitation. After supper, the pastor stood and said a few words about thanks. Not just for full barns, but for full houses. He didn't point at anyone, but a few eyes slid toward Eliza and Jesse. She squeezed his hand under the table. He squeezed back. As winter deepened, the room by the front window became Eliza's spot for letters, lists, and reading. Jesse called it the library, which made the twins sit straighter when they passed it. One afternoon, Eliza looked up from her book to see Jesse leaning in the doorway, watching her like the first day he had truly looked. She smiled. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking how different the house sounds," he said. "How so?" "Less hollow," he answered. "More home." She turned a page and felt her throat tighten. "Mine too," she said. On a bright, cold morning, Matthew wanted to learn to whittle. Jesse showed him how to pull the knife away from his thumb, how to turn the stick, how to keep the shavings in a neat pile. Maisie asked Eliza to teach her to stitch. "Straight lines first," Eliza said, guiding little fingers with steady care. "Then we could make flowers." Maisie's first line bent and bumped, but she held it up like a banner. "It's perfect," Eliza said. "Because you made it." That night, they all sat by the stove. Jesse mended tack. Matthew whittled a little horse, more splinter than stallion, but loved all the same. Maisie worked her crooked stitches. Eliza read, her voice weaving the room together. When she finished a chapter, no one spoke right away. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full of breath and safety and the sound a house makes when it finally belongs to its people. When spring came back, the earth turned soft. New grass pushed up, bright and stubborn. Eliza planted herbs in small boxes along the porch, tracing neat labels. Mint, thyme, chamomile. Maisie made a painted sign, Mama Eliza's Garden. The letters leaned and danced, and Eliza loved every crooked one. One afternoon, as clouds drifted like ships across a blue sea, a wagon from town rattled up the lane. It carried the same women who had once stared past Eliza, Mrs. Calhoun, the pastor's wife, and two others with busy hands and anxious faces. They climbed down with bundles and awkward smiles. "We were wondering," the pastor's wife began, twisting her apron corner. "Would you show us how you taught Matthew to tie boots so quick? My boy still tangles his laces something awful." Eliza laughed a light, clear sound. "Of course," she said. "Bring the boots and the boys." They stayed an hour on the porch, learning the log bridge and the bunny under, laughing at every misstep. When they left, they handed over a basket, brown bread, a jar of pickles, a length of lace for Maisie, and a small packet of tea for Eliza. On the note, a single line, "Thank you for everything we didn't see at first." That evening, Jesse stood by the fence and watched the sunset spill over the range like poured gold. Eliza rolled up beside him. They didn't speak for a while. The world made its own sounds, crickets and wind, and the steady thrum of a ranch settling down. "Do you ever think about the day at the station?" she asked finally. "Every now and then," he said. "I think about how the train made such a noise that morning, and how, somehow, it was the quiet in you that I remember most." Eliza tipped her head, considering. "I remember you taking off your hat," she said, "and not looking away." He reached for her hand. She gave it, and they stood like that until the sun slid all the way behind the peaks. From time to time, a new stranger would drift through Hollow Creek on a mule with a bent ear or a horse with a scar, looking for work or rest or trouble. The town had learned something about trouble. It had learned not to judge fast. It had learned to stand a little closer to one another. And it had learned that strength sometimes rolls up in a chair and throws an inkwell when it has to. On the first warm day of early summer, the twins begged for a picnic. "By the cottonwood," Maisie said. "With jam," Matthew added. Eliza packed bread, cheese, apples, and the last of the apricot preserves Mrs. Calhoun had saved for her. Jesse carried a blanket and that old, heavy book, the one with the cowboy and the dinosaur. They spread the quilt under the tree, and the breeze stirred the leaves like shy applause. Eliza read while the children leaned in, and Jesse lay back with his hat over his eyes, smiling at the sky. When the story ended, Maisie asked, "What did the dinosaur want most again?" "A friend who didn't run away when he roared," Eliza said. "Did he get one?" Matthew asked. Eliza looked at Jesse. He pushed his hat back and looked at her, and the answer was in both their faces. "Yes," she said softly. "He did." A few days later, Jesse hung a small sign by the gate. It was plain, made from a sanded plank and 3 careful words, "Holt Family Ranch." He set down his hammer and stepped back. Eliza wheeled up beside him. Matthew and Maisie stood arm in arm, squinting to read. "I like it," Maisie said. "It looks like it's always been there." Eliza reached up and touched the wood with her fingertips. "So do I," she said. They went back inside, where the house smelled like stew and warm flour and the pages of a book that had been loved. The table was set, the lamp trimmed, the door left open to let in evening air. It wasn't a grand life. It was better than that. It was steady. They ate. They told small stories about small things, how the calf kicked the pail, how a bluebird fussed at the mirror, how Matthew carved a horse that looked more like a dog, but ran just as fast in his mind. And when the dishes were washed and the lamp turned low, Eliza read one more chapter. Jesse watched her and thought of every road that had carried them here, hard ones, long ones, and how together they had turned those roads into home. Under the wide Montana sky, Among fields that once felt too wild for promises, Jesse and Eliza kept choosing each other, on bright days and stormy ones, with hope that didn't brag and love that didn't quit. They showed their town, and maybe the world, something simple and true. Love doesn't need perfect legs or spotless pasts. It just needs to show up, stay, and choose again and again. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that broken things can still be beautiful, stick with us. Subscribe and tap the bell for soul-stirring stories. We bring you unforgettable tales of love, loss, grit, and grace. Out here, where bullets sometimes miss, but hearts rarely do, every story deserves to be felt. Every soul deserves to be stirred.